Shalom. This week we have Parashat Re'eh, which means look. And we're going to be studying the fifth Aliyah from the Barim 1422 to 1518. And it's named The Choice That Defines Our Reality. This week's portion is a direct wake-up call for the Jew. Textually, it tells, see, I place before you today the blessing and the curse. Is the blessing a chance, coincidence, or fate, or the consequences of where you place your attention? That would be the question that we should have an answer for. Today, the Torah confronts us with an avoidable reality. The blessing and the curse are neither capricious rewards nor punishment, but the exact result of the direction of our heart, what our heart chooses. Is the blessing a stroke of a good fortune or the result of filling the soul with divine substance? Today, Torah faces us with the transformative truth. The curse, which in Hebrew is kelala, is not a stroke or bad fortune, not magical punishment, but the sad consequences of emptying our life of the presence of the Creator. Re'eh marks the turning point between the wandering journey of the desert and the soon-to-be settlement in the Promised Land. Moshe shows us how we must act upon arriving there, explaining to us that having a freedom of choice is not deciding between two equal options. In reality, it is about choosing whether we fill our soul with the presence of Hashem, or if we leave it empty by moving away from the Torah. Moshe proclaims the imperative Re'eh, look. See, today I place before you the blessing and the curse, he repeated. The blessing, which is the Beraha, manifests by listening and connecting with the precepts of the Hashem. The curse, the kelala, inevitably arises when straying from the path to pursue pain deities. Upon crossing the Yarden, the nation must pronounce the blessing upon Mount Gerizim and the curse upon Mount Ebal in the region of Shechem. Just as Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal receive the same rain, but one bears fruit due to the being fertile, and the other one remains dry due to being rocky. Two people go through the same situations. The difference lies in whether we decide to fill our soul with the presence of Hashem, or we leave it empty by moving away from the Torah. In the pure language of the Torah, kelala comes from the root KLL, which means to be light, vain, or lacking of weight, while holiness grants soulish density, kabod. Kelala is the creation of a vacuum, halal, the lack of substance that occurs when a person disconnects from Hashem. The curse is not lightning bolt falling from heaven, but the inner erosion we suffer by emptying our daily decision of the divine will. The first legal task in the Promised Land is to dismantle the pagan sanctuaries on hills, mountains, and under every leafy tree, destroying their statues and erasing their name Moshe warns, you should not do the same to Hashem your Elohim. Rashi, from the 11th century commentator, explains that this prohibits both imitation, the chaotic rites of the Canaanites, and erasing or damaging the sacred name and the components of the tabernacle. Paganism offer a light and comfortable spiritually under the leafy tree, where the ego did not require transformation. For the soul to experience the fullness of Hashem, it must first vacate the lightness of the destructive habits. It is not possible to fill the life with the presence of the Creator while empty spaces dedicated to vanity persist. Israel could not offer burnt offerings in any corner in their own way. They had to go exclusively to the place that Hashem would choose to establish His name. Nowadays, although we don't have a temple, this instruction teaches that the place and the manner of the worship avodah do matter. We cannot serve Hashem where there is no holiness, nor can we pretend to be Jews while maintaining remnants or mixtures of pagan and Christian rites. Service to Creator demands total purity, without adapting the truth to our taste or mixing the sacred with the profane. Moshe reminds them that during the journey through the desert, each one did what seemed right by its own criteria. Rabbi Sforno from the 16th century explained that in the desert, service to Hashem was not completed. As they were in a constant movement, people only fulfilled obligatory offerings, while promises and voluntary offerings were not made by each person when they wanted or when it arose from the heart. But Moshe warns them that upon entering the promised land, it must change. They can no longer serve Hashem half-heartedly or according to their own taste, but must unify all their worship with the framework in place that the Creator demands. Nowadays, making radical changes to the precepts or incorporating practices and concepts with Christian traits is not a renewal, but a forbidden mixture. Bringing foreign elements into the service of the Creator constitutes avodah zarah, which translates into strange worship, as it alters the purity of the covenant. Serving Hashem only when we feel like it, or pretending to adapt the Torah to our personal ideas or remands of the past, creates a false faith without substance. The Torah teaches that the true elevation is not about inventing our own way of worshiping, but about faithfully adhering to the divine instruction transmitted by our sages. When we subordinate our individual criteria to the truth of the Torah, we protect our soul from syncretism and a spiritual vacuum. Could it be that having money or food is not just to indulge ourselves, but to learn to be better people? Today, we are going to see how sharing what we harvest completely changed our way of living. The Pasuk 14:22 says, you should surely tithe a tenth part of all the yield of your seed that the fields brings forth year by year. The Torah asks to set aside a tenth part of the harvest. The person did not give away this tithe, but traveled with it to the Jerusalem to eat. Is there an atmosphere of respect? If the person lived very far away and it was burdensome to carry so much food, they could sell it in their own town, carry the money in their pocket, and buy fresh food upon arriving in the holy city. The people came from walking through the desert where they received manna and from the heaven every day without work in the field. Upon entering the promised land and starting to sow, there was a danger of forgetting where the help came from. Rashi, sage from the 11th century, explains that the phrase "you should surely tithe" teach that giving this portion brings blessing and prosperity. The main objective of this rule is not just eat, but to educate the heart by traveling and eating in a place dedicated to the divine service. The farmer understood that things are not achieved solely by own strength. Enjoying what we earn with respect and humility help the soulish strength from filling with pride. And you should not forsake the Levite who lives within your gate, for he has no portion nor inheritance with you. This is in this pasuk. It says that the money obtained from the sale of the tithe had to be used to buy goods, food, and celebrate in Jerusalem. But the feast could not be behind closed doors. It was mandatory to invite and to support the Levite of the city who had no land of his own to cultivate. Parenthetically, let us see what the functions of the Levites were in the set apart cities. According to our sages, the work of the Levite and the Kohanim in these cities was the engine to keep the nation's identity alive. Their function was not limited to the Mishkan in the daily life. They fulfilled three fundamental tasks. They were the teachers and educators of the community, as Ramban Maimonides, the great sage from the 12th century, explains that the tribe of Levi has set apart from worldly labors for a single purpose: to study, teach the ways of Hashem, and guide the people. Since they did not have to plow the land from early morning, they dedicated the time to study the Torah. They opened schools, taught children, and remind families how to live according to the covenant. They also act as judges and counselors of peace when there was a commercial issue between neighbors, a doubt about how to fulfill the process, or a family conflict. The Levites were the ones who mediated. They formed the local courts, ensuring that justice and righteousness were applied in every corner of the land, not only in Jerusalem. Furthermore, they offered refuge and spiritual restoration. The cities of the Levites some of them function also as a refuge for the person who by accident took another's life. The sages of the Talmud explained that this was no coincidence. The Levite, with his life dedicated to the service and study, generated an atmosphere of peace and helped rehabilitate this person, healing their soulish strain after having gone through such a great tragedy. The lesson to learn when the Torah says you should not forsake the Levite teaches that sustaining him is not an act of simple charity, but part of the mechanism of a perfect society. The farmer feeds the body of the Levite and the fruits of the land in return for the Levite. The Levite feeds the soulish strength of the farmer with the wisdom of the Torah. If the farmer is selfish and does not share his tithe, he forces the Levite to look for work in the field so as not to starve. And what is the result? The people are left without teachers, school clothes, and the entire community falls into ignorance and a moral vacuum. Sforno comments that by being in Jerusalem, surrounded by wise people, families learn to live with better values. Inviting the Levite to the table maintained the unity of all families, as it was experienced during the journey through the desert. There, no property difference or social classes based on land existed. The entire nation camped around the Mishkan and ate from the same manna. The Levite was not on the sidelines, but at the very center of the community life, serving as the spiritual bridge that united the 12 tribes. Upon entering the land of Canaan, the risk was that each tribe will isolate itself in its own fields and economic strongholds. By commanding that the Levite, who had no territorial inheritance, be invited to the family table on each festival, the Torah recreated the unity of the desert. The home opened its doors and the table became a small Mishkan, where the family of farmers and the custodian divines of the service sat as equals. Thus, the memory of the journey remains alive and the soulish strength of the people remain united under a single identity. True joy is not felt eating alone, but by inviting the one who has less. Help those in need, prevent our heart from becoming hard and indifferent. When we open the door of our house to others, happiness lasts much longer than does not remain empty. At the end of every 3 years, you should bring forth all the tithes of your produce in the same year, and you should lay it up within your gates. And the Levite, because he has no portion of the inheritance with you, and the strange and the girl, and the fatherless, and the widow who are within your gates shall come and shall eat and be satisfied. Hashem, your Creator, has blessed you in the work of your hand, which you do. Here, official justice is established by commanding that every 3 years the use of the tithe changes the Maaser Ani. Instead of taking it to Jerusalem to eat as a family, the food was kept in the town itself to distribute indirectly among the Levites, the converts, orphans, and the widows. Ramban, from the 13th century sage, clarifies that the Torah names together the ger, that means the stranger who embraced the faith, the orphan, and the widow. These people did not have any ancestral families with land in Israel, so the law secured they received fast and direct help without feeling embarrassed. The blessing in what we do not depend on how many things we keep in our barn, but on how many people we help to eat. Fulfilling this responsibility cleanses and strengthens our soulish strength, making our work worthwhile in the eyes of the Creator. Material abundance is not a trophy for the ego, but a sacred deposit to elevate the soul and dignify the community. To answer the question which we began the study, what we earn is not just for us to use, not for private accumulation, but a pedagogical opportunity that the Creator gives us to learn to be generous and refine our soulish strength. We learn then that giving thanks and tithing from what we receive protect us from arrogance and from believing that the prosperity is the exclusive fruit of our own strength. True celebration and authentic al-beraha do not exist in a selfish isolation, but when we open the table to sustain the Levite and share with the needy, caring for the orphan, the widow, and the ger in our city. This ensures that our daily effort has divine substance and does not remain in a moral vacuum. Toda Rabah.